They called her a thief, a gold digger, a maid who sang stolen lullabies to trap a broken man. But the night Colt Mallory found Nora May waist deep in floodwater, clutching his daughter like she was her own flesh and blood, he realized the truth. She hadn't come to take anything. She'd come to give back what his family never knew they'd lost. This is the story of a woman with nothing, who saved a man who had everything, except a reason to live. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The house stood like a gravestone against the Texas sky. Colt Mallory had forgotten how much he hated coming home. The iron gate creaked the same way it had 2 years ago, back when Eliza was still alive to oil the hinges and scold him for tracking mud across her clean floors. Back when laughter echoed through these halls instead of silence. Back when his daughter's nursery smelled like lavender and milk instead of dust and regret. He'd been 26 when he buried his wife, 28 now, and he still couldn't say her name without his throat closing up like a fist. The September wind carried the scent of mesquite and coming rain. Colt's horse, a bay gelding named Prophet, snorted and stamped beneath him, sensing his rider's reluctance. The animal had more sense than he did. Prophet knew when a man was riding toward his demons instead of away from them. "Easy, boy," Colt murmured, though the words were as much for himself as for the horse. He'd received the letter 3 weeks ago in San Antonio, where he'd been spending his inheritance on whiskey and poker and anything else that made him forget he had a daughter he'd abandoned. The handwriting was Mrs. Alden's, his late father's housekeeper, the woman who'd practically raised him after his mother died of consumption when he was 7. "Mr. Mallory, I would not write if it were not urgent. Emma will not speak. She stares at the window for hours. The doctor says there is nothing physically wrong, but I know better. She needs her father. She needs you. Whatever grief you carry, it cannot be heavier than a child's silence. Come home." Mrs. Alden Colt had read those words 100 times until the paper grew soft as cloth in his hands. Each time, the shame burned a little deeper. What kind of man leaves his own child? What kind of father rides away from an infant because he can't bear to look at her without seeing her mother's eyes? A coward. That's what kind. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the dirt with a hollow thud. The ranch house loomed before him, 3 stories of limestone and oak, built by his grandfather in 1842 when Texas was still its own republic. The Mallory family had carved their fortune from this land with blood and backbone, running cattle from the hill country to the Kansas railheads, building an empire one drive at a time. And now it all belonged to him. A man who couldn't even face his own daughter. The front door was unlocked. It always had been. His father used to say that any man desperate enough to rob them was desperate enough to need whatever he took. Colt had never decided if that was wisdom or foolishness, but he'd kept the tradition anyway. He expected silence when he stepped inside. Expected the hollow echo of his own footsteps, the weight of emptiness pressing down on him like a physical thing. Instead, he heard singing. Colt froze in the entryway, one hand still on the doorframe, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. The voice was soft, untrained, but achingly pure. It drifted down from the second floor, threading through the shadows like smoke, like memory, like something that shouldn't exist but did anyway. And the song. God Almighty, the song. "Hush now, my darling. The stars are all sleeping, the moon's tucked away in her blanket of blue. The world's full of darkness, but I'll keep on keeping watch over your dreams until morning breaks through." His legs moved before his mind could catch up. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his spurs jingling with each step, his breath coming harsh and ragged. That lullaby. Eliza's lullaby. The one her mother had taught her, passed down through 3 generations of Kentucky women. The one she used to sing to Emma every night before bed. Her voice sweet and warm as honey in tea. The one nobody else in the world should know. The nursery door stood halfway open, candlelight flickering through the gap. Colt pressed his palm against the wood, and for a moment he couldn't make himself push it wider. His hands were shaking, his entire body was shaking, because if he opened that door and found his wife's ghost sitting in the rocking chair, singing to their daughter, no, that was madness. That was grief talking, the same grief that had chased him halfway across Texas for 2 years. He pushed the door open. The woman in the rocking chair was not Eliza. She was younger, maybe 23 or 24, with dark honey hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her dress was plain gray cotton, the kind servants wore, with an apron tied at her waist. She sat with her back to him, cradling Emma against her chest, rocking in that slow, gentle rhythm that all mothers seem to know instinctively. And she was still singing, "Sleep, little one, while the night wind is blowing, I'll keep you safe until sunrise appears. Tomorrow brings troubles, but now they're not showing. Tonight, you are sheltered from all of your fears." Emma's eyes were closed, her small body relaxed in a way Colt hadn't seen since before Eliza died. His daughter was 2 years old now, though he'd missed most of those years. The last time he'd held her, she'd been 6 months old and screaming, her face red and furious, and he'd thrust her into Mrs. Alden's arms and ridden away like the devil himself was on his heels. Shame burned through him again, hot and corrosive. The woman must have sensed his presence because she turned her head slightly, though she didn't stop rocking. When their eyes met, Colt felt something shift in his chest. Not attraction, exactly, though she was pretty in a quiet, unassuming way. It was something deeper than that, something that felt like recognition, though he'd never seen her before in his life. She didn't startle, didn't gasp or jump or show any of the surprise he'd expected. She simply looked at him with steady gray eyes and whispered, "You must be Mr. Mallory." Her accent was Southern, but not Texan. Arkansas, maybe, or Tennessee. The kind of voice that knew hardship but hadn't let it make her hard. Colt's throat was too tight to speak. He managed a nod. The woman, the maid, he assumed, rose carefully, moving with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent a lot of time holding sleeping children. She carried Emma to the small bed in the corner, the one Eliza had picked out before Emma was born, hand-carved oak with morning glories etched into the headboard. She laid his daughter down like she was made of spun glass, tucking the quilt around her small body, smoothing the dark curls away from her forehead. Emma didn't wake. She just sighed softly and turned her face into the pillow. The maid straightened, clasping her hands in front of her apron. In the candlelight, Colt could see she was tired. There were shadows under her eyes, and her hands bore the rough redness of hard work. Washing, cooking, scrubbing. "I'm Nora May," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Alden hired me 6 months ago when the last girl left. I hope I didn't overstep singing to her. She was fretful tonight, and the song just came to me." "Where did you learn it?" The words came out harsher than Colt intended, almost accusatory. "That song. Where did you learn it?" Nora's brow furrowed slightly. "Learn it? I'm not sure I did learn it. I've been humming it to Emma for weeks now. It feels like something I've always known, but I can't remember anyone teaching it to me. Does it matter?" "It was my wife's song," Colt said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "Her grandmother taught it to her. She sang it to Emma every night before—" He couldn't finish. Couldn't say before she died out loud. Understanding flickered across Nora's face, followed by something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't been so carefully controlled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mallory. I didn't know. If it causes you pain, I won't—" "No!" The word came out too fast, too desperate. Colt took a breath, trying to steady himself. "No, Emma was sleeping, really sleeping. I haven't seen her that peaceful since—" Again, he couldn't finish. Nora glanced back at the small bed where Emma lay, curled on her side like a question mark. "She has nightmares," Nora said softly. "Almost every night. She wakes up crying, but she won't say what frightens her. Sometimes I wonder if she even knows how to put it into words anymore." The guilt hit Colt like a physical blow. "Mrs. Alden said she stopped talking." "Not stopped exactly. She can speak. She just chooses not to. The doctor called it selective mutism, said it sometimes happens to children after trauma." Nora's voice remained gentle, non-judgmental, but Colt felt the weight of accusation anyway. "She speaks to me sometimes. Single words. Water. Outside. Never full sentences. Never her feelings." Colt moved to the bed, his movements slow and uncertain. He'd forgotten how small she was, how fragile. Emma had Eliza's dark hair and his own strong jawline, a strange combination that made her look like both of them and neither of them at the same time. He reached out to touch her hair, then pulled back. He didn't have the right. Not anymore. I shouldn't have left, he said, the words tearing out of him like confession. I shouldn't have. But you did. Nora's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. And now you're here. That's what matters. Is it? Colt turned to look at her, and for the first time in 2 years, he let someone see the full weight of his grief. I couldn't look at her, you understand? Every time I saw her face, I saw Eliza. Saw my wife dying in that field, her neck broken, her horse standing over her like he couldn't understand what happened. And Emma was crying, always crying, and I couldn't be what she needed. Nora held his gaze steadily. And now? Now I'm still broken, Colt admitted. But Mrs. Alden was right. My daughter needs her father, even if he's a coward who ran away. You're here now, Nora repeated. That takes a different kind of courage. They stood in silence for a moment, two strangers in a candlelit nursery, with a sleeping child between them and ghosts all around. Colt could smell lavender. Nora must use it in the wash water, the same way Eliza had. The scent made his chest ache. What's the rest of your story? He asked finally. Mrs. Alden wouldn't have hired you without references. Where are you from? Something shuddered in Nora's expression, a door closing. Arkansas. I'm a widow. My husband died of fever 3 years ago. After that, I traveled wherever the work took me. It was the truth, Colt could tell, but not the whole truth. There was more she wasn't saying, layers of pain folded up and tucked away where they wouldn't show. He understood that. He'd been doing the same thing for 2 years. Well, he said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how intimate this felt despite being completely proper. Thank you for taking care of her, for making her sleep peacefully. She's easy to love, Nora said simply. Some children are. The words hit him like an accusation, though he knew she didn't mean them that way, because Emma should be easy for him to love. She was his daughter, his own flesh and blood. But instead, loving her had felt like dying, like opening himself up to a pain so vast it could swallow him whole. I should let you get back to your quarters, Colt said, stepping back. It's late. Nora nodded, moving toward the door with that same quiet grace. But at the threshold, she paused. Mr. Mallory? For what it's worth, Emma looks at her window every evening around sunset. I think she's been waiting for someone. I think she's been waiting for you. Then she was gone, her footsteps soft on the stairs, leaving Colt alone with his sleeping daughter and the ghost of a song that shouldn't exist. He sank into the rocking chair, still warm from where Nora had been sitting. Through the window, he could see the hill country stretching out beneath a bruised sky, thunderheads building to the west. Rain was coming. He could smell it on the wind. Colt sat there for a long time, watching Emma sleep. She looked so much like Eliza it physically hurt, but she also looked like herself, like Emma Mallory, a person separate from her mother, a girl with her own sorrows and her own strength. His daughter. I'm sorry, he whispered to her, though she couldn't hear him. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I don't know how to be your father. I don't know how to do any of this without her, but I'm going to try. I swear to God, I'm going to try. Emma shifted in her sleep, her small hand reaching out as if grasping for something that wasn't there. Colt's throat closed up. He wanted to go to her, to take her hand, to tell her he was home and he wasn't leaving again. But the distance between the rocking chair and that small bed felt like miles. Like an ocean he didn't know how to cross. So instead, he sat in the dark and listened to his daughter breathe, and tried to remember how Eliza's lullaby went. Hush now, my darling. The stars are all sleeping. Downstairs, a clock chimed midnight. The witching hour, his grandmother used to call it. The time when the dead walked and the living dreamed and the world turned strange and thin. Colt Mallory had come home to ghosts. He just hadn't expected them to sing. The morning came hard and bright, sunlight spilling through the nursery window like an accusation. Colt woke with his neck stiff from sleeping in the rocking chair, his boots still on, his hat crushed beneath his elbow. Emma's bed was empty. Panic hit him first, sharp and immediate, but then he heard voices from downstairs, the clatter of dishes, the smell of coffee and bacon and fresh biscuits. Life. The house was full of life. He descended the stairs slowly, his body protesting every step. 2 years of hard living had taken their toll, whiskey and cards and sleeping rough under the stars because hotels felt too much like graves, too closed in, too final. The kitchen was exactly as he remembered it. A massive room with a stone hearth, a long oak table scarred from generations of use, copper pots hanging from iron hooks. His grandmother had cooked here. His mother, Eliza. Now Nora stood at the stove, flipping eggs with practiced efficiency, while Emma sat at the table, pushing a wooden horse across the surface, making soft clip-clop sounds with her mouth. Mrs. Alden was there too, her iron-gray hair pulled back in its customary bun, her face lined with 60 years of hard work and harder wisdom. When she saw Colt in the doorway, her expression flickered between relief and reproach. "So you finally decided to show yourself," she said, her voice gruff. "I was beginning to think you'd ride back out before morning." "Thought about it," Colt admitted. "Almost did. But you didn't. That counts for something." Mrs. Alden poured him coffee without asking, the same way she'd been doing since he was old enough to drink it. "Sit down before you fall down. You look like hell." "Feel like it too." Emma's head came up at the sound of his voice. For a moment their eyes met, his blue, hers dark brown like her mother's, and Colt saw the question there. "Are you real? Are you staying?" He wanted to say yes, wanted to promise her he'd never leave again, but the words stuck in his throat like broken glass. "Good morning, Emma," he managed finally. "That's a fine horse you've got there." She didn't answer, just looked at him for another long moment, then went back to her playing clip-clop across the scarred oak surface. The rejection shouldn't have hurt. He'd been gone for 2 years. But it did anyway. A dull ache right in the center of his chest. Nora set a plate in front of him, eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and honey. "You should eat," she said quietly. "Mrs. Alden says you usually skip breakfast." "I used to," Colt said. "Things change." "Some things," Mrs. Alden muttered. "Other things stay stubborn as sin." They ate in relative silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware and Emma's soft horse noises. Colt tried not to stare at his daughter, but he couldn't help it. She'd grown so much. Her baby roundness was giving way to the lean angles of childhood. She'd be tall, he thought, tall like him, if he stayed around long enough to see it. "I'll need to tour the ranch today," Colt said finally, addressing Mrs. Alden. "See what's changed while I was gone. Who's running the cattle operations?" "Jack Brennan," Mrs. Alden replied. "Your father's old foreman. He's kept things running smooth. The other hands respect him." "Good. I'll ride out after breakfast." "And Emma?" The question came from Nora, who was washing dishes at the basin, her back to him. "Will you spend time with her? She needs to know you're real." The gentleness in her voice somehow made the words cut deeper. "I don't know what to say to her," Colt admitted. "I don't know how to—" "You don't have to say anything," Nora interrupted, turning to face him. "Children don't need speeches. They need presence. Just sit with her, play with her toys, let her see you're not going to disappear." It sounded so simple when she said it, but Colt knew better. Nothing about this was simple. Still, after he finished eating, he moved to sit beside Emma at the table. She glanced at him sideways, wary, like he was a strange dog that might bite. "Can I see your horse?" Colt asked, gesturing to the wooden toy. Emma hesitated, then slowly pushed it toward him. The carving was beautiful, intricate and smooth, probably made by one of the ranch hands during a long winter. Colt turned it over in his hands, admiring the craftsmanship. "He's a fine animal," Colt said. "What's his name?" Silence. Emma just watched him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Does he have a name?" Colt tried again. More silence. Then, so softly he almost missed it. "Prophet." The word hit him like a punch. Prophet was his horse's name. She'd named her toy after his horse, which meant she remembered. Somehow, despite being barely 6 months old when he left, Emma remembered him. "That's a good name," Colt managed, his voice rough. "Prophet's a good horse, strong and steady. He doesn't spook easy." Emma's small hand reached out, and for a heart-stopping moment, Colt thought she was going to touch him. But she just took the wooden horse back, cradling it against her chest like something precious. "Maybe tomorrow," Nora said from across the room, "you could take Emma to see the real prophet. If you're staying, that is. If he was staying, the question hung in the air like smoke. I'm staying, Colt said, and realized he meant it. I'm not running anymore. Mrs. Alden made a sound that might have been approval or might have been skepticism. We'll see. Words are cheap. It's what you do that matters. I know. Colt stood, feeling Emma's eyes following him. I'm going to check on the ranch. I'll be back before supper. He made it as far as the door before Emma's voice stopped him cold. You left. The words were barely audible, spoken to the table rather than to him, but they carried the weight of 2 years' worth of abandonment. You left me. Colt's hand froze on the doorframe. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to escape this moment, this conversation, this guilt that felt like drowning. But he'd promised he wouldn't run anymore. So instead, he turned back, sank down on one knee so he was eye level with his daughter. You're right, he said, his voice breaking. I did leave you, and that was wrong. That was... Emma, I was so sad when your mama died that I forgot how to be your papa. I forgot how to be anything except sad. But that's no excuse. You needed me, and I wasn't here, and I'm sorrier than I know how to say. Emma's chin trembled, her eyes filled with tears. And for the first time in 2 years, Colt saw his wife's expression on his daughter's face. Not her features, but her capacity for forgiveness, her gentle heart that could love even when it hurt. Will you leave again? Emma whispered. No, baby. No, I won't. I promise. Promise? I promise. Emma studied him for a long moment, weighing his words against 2 years of broken promises, of empty waiting, of a father who didn't come home. Then, slowly, she slid off her chair and walked toward him. Colt held his breath, didn't move, didn't dare hope. And then Emma wrapped her small arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder, and Colt felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 2 years finally beginning to thaw. He held his daughter and felt her tears soaking through his shirt, and he realized Nora was right. Children didn't need speeches. They needed presence. They needed someone to stay. I've got you, he whispered into Emma's hair. I've got you, sweetheart. Papa's home. Behind him, Colt heard Mrs. Alden's satisfied grunt and the soft sound of Nora leaving the room, giving them privacy. Outside, thunder rumbled across the hill country, and the first drops of rain began to fall. But inside the Mallory kitchen, with his daughter in his arms and tears streaming down his face, Colt finally felt like he'd come home. Even if home wasn't the same as it used to be. Even if the woman who'd made it home was gone. He was here now, and he wasn't leaving. That would have to be enough. The rain that started that morning didn't let up for 3 days. It came down in sheets, turning the ranch roads to rivers of mud and confining everyone to the house. Colt spent those days relearning his daughter, the way she liked her eggs scrambled dry, not runny, how she hummed to herself when she thought no one was listening, the exact angle she tilted her head when she was considering whether to trust something he said. And he watched Nora. He couldn't help it. She moved through the house like water, quiet and essential, always where she was needed before anyone realized they needed her. She mended Emma's torn dress without being asked. She made Mrs. Alden sit down when the old woman's arthritis flared up. She knew which floorboards creaked and avoided them when Emma was napping. It was the small things that caught his attention, the way she saved the bacon grease for soap making, how she sang while she worked, not his wife's lullaby, but older songs, ballads about rivers and mountains and long roads home. The careful way she counted out the coffee grounds, stretching supplies like someone who'd known hunger. On the third evening, after Emma had been put to bed and Mrs. Alden had retired to her quarters, Colt found Nora in the kitchen doing accounts by lamplight. She had the household ledger open in front of her, her lips moving silently as she added columns of numbers. You do the books too? He asked from the doorway. Nora looked up, and for just a moment he saw exhaustion in her face before she smoothed it away. Mrs. Alden's eyes aren't what they used to be. I offered to help. That's not in a maid's duties. Neither is singing lullabies to the rancher's daughter, but here we are. She said it without rancor, just stating a fact. Colt moved into the room, poured himself coffee from the pot that was always on the stove. Where'd you learn accounting? Something flickered across her face. That same shuddering he'd seen before. That door closing on memories she didn't want to share. My father taught me. He said a woman should know how to manage money, same as a man. Said you never knew when you might need to stand on your own. Smart man. He was. Nora's voice went soft. He was a lot of things. Colt sat down across from her, cradling his coffee cup. The kitchen was warm despite the rain hammering against the windows. Cozy, almost. It felt strange to be sitting here with a woman who wasn't Eliza. Strange, but not wrong. Just different. Tell me about him, he said. Your father. Nora's pen stilled on the page. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she set the pen down carefully and folded her hands on the table. His name was Henry May. He owned a ranch in Arkansas, nothing as grand as this, but respectable. Good land, good cattle. He was proud of what he'd built. She paused, her jaw tightening. During the war, he helped some Union soldiers who were separated from their unit. Fed them, hid them, got them safely north. Someone found out. They called him a traitor. Colt felt his chest tighten. He knew how this story ended. He'd seen enough of war's aftermath to know. They hanged him, Nora continued, her voice flat now, emotionless. Dragged him out of our house at dawn and strung him up from our own oak tree. Made my mother and me watch. I was 14. Jesus, Colt breathed. After that, the ranch was seized. Confederate sympathizers took everything, the land, the cattle, even my mother's wedding ring. We had nothing. My mother died of pneumonia that winter. She just gave up. Stopped fighting. Nora's fingers traced the edge of the ledger. I married at 16. A good man, a kind man. Thomas Gray. He was a blacksmith. We were poor, but we were happy. Then yellow fever came through in 75, and he was gone too. The kitchen fell silent except for the rain and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Colt didn't know what to say. What could anyone say to a story like that? I'm sorry, he managed finally, knowing how inadequate it sounded. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Nora picked up her pen again. After Thomas died, I worked wherever I could. Laundry, cooking, sewing, saved every penny. Then I heard about positions opening up in Texas, and I thought maybe this far from Arkansas, I could start over. Be someone new. Are you? Someone new? Nora met his eyes, and in the lamplight they looked almost silver. I don't know yet. Are you? The question hit harder than she probably meant it to. Because, no, he wasn't someone new. He was still the same broken man who'd run from his daughter, still the same coward who couldn't save his wife. Working on it, he said, that's all any of us can do. They sat in comfortable silence after that, Nora returning to her columns while Colt sipped his coffee and listened to the rain. It was peaceful in a way he hadn't felt in years. Like maybe the house wasn't just a tomb full of memories. Like maybe it could be something else. Upstairs, Emma cried out in her sleep. Both of them were on their feet instantly, but Nora held up a hand. Let me, she said. She's used to me. Colt wanted to argue, wanted to be the one to comfort his daughter, but Nora was right. Emma was used to her, and he was still learning how to be a father again. He listened to Nora's footsteps on the stairs, heard the soft murmur of her voice through the ceiling. The singing started a moment later, not Eliza's lullaby this time, but something else, something older. A mountain song about a girl and a river and finding your way home. Colt closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. For the first time since Eliza died, he felt something other than grief. He couldn't name it exactly. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Or maybe just the beginning of healing. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm finally broken. Colt woke early, dressed in his work clothes, the sturdy denim and leather he'd abandoned 2 years ago, and headed out to survey the ranch with Jack Brennan. Jack was 60 if he was a day, weathered as old boot leather, with a gray mustache and eyes that missed nothing. He'd worked for Colt's father for 30 years, and he greeted Colt's return with a firm handshake and a searching look. Good to see you back, son, Jack said, and the word son carried weight. Been holding things together, but a ranch needs its owner. I appreciate what you've done, Jack. How are we looking? They rode out together, Prophet sure-footed despite the mud, and Jack gave him the rundown. The cattle operation was solid. They'd driven 1,000 head to Kansas last spring, got good prices. The hands were loyal, worked hard. The breeding program Colt's father had started was producing quality stock. But there were problems too. Fences needed mending. The south pasture had flooded, and they'd lost some calves. 2 of the line shacks needed new roofs before winter. And there was trouble with a neighbor, a man named Vernon Pike, who claimed the creek between their properties should be his eastern boundary, not the Mallory's western one. Pike's been pushing his luck, Jack said, spitting tobacco juice into the mud, testing to see if anyone's minding the store. Now that you're back, I reckon he'll back off. And if he doesn't? Then we handle it, same as we always have. They rode in silence for a while, checking fence lines and water sources. The land spread out around them in rolling hills covered in live oak and cedar, stretched thin by summer heat despite the recent rain. It was hard country, beautiful but unforgiving, the kind of place that made you strong or broke you trying. Colt had forgotten how much he loved it. The girl, Jack said suddenly, the one Mrs. Alden hired, Nora. She seems decent. She is. Good with Emma, too. The little one follows her around like a shadow when you're not there. Jack gave him a sideways glance. Probably good for her, having a woman's influence. Child needs that. Colt heard what Jack wasn't saying. Your daughter needs a mother. But Emma had a mother. She was buried on the hill behind the house under a limestone marker that read Eliza Mallory, beloved wife and mother, 1852 to 1876. Nora's just the maid, Colt said, more harshly than he intended. Sure, Jack agreed in a tone that suggested he didn't believe it for a second. Just the maid. They got back to the house around noon, hot and hungry. Mrs. Alden had made stew, thick with beef and vegetables, served with fresh bread. Emma was helping Nora set the table, carrying napkins with the solemnity of a sacred duty. Papa! She ran to him when he came through the door, and the word still made his throat tight. We made bread. Nora showed me how to punch the dough. Did she now? Colt swung Emma up into his arms, ignoring the mud on his clothes. I bet you were a good helper. The best, Nora confirmed, smiling. She's got strong hands, baker's hands. They ate together, Colt, Emma, Mrs. Alden, and Nora, and it felt almost like a family, almost like the loneliness that had lived in this house for 2 years was finally lifting. Emma chattered about her morning, about the birds she'd seen from her window, about the kitten that lived in the barn that she desperately wanted to bring inside. Cats belong in barns, Mrs. Alden said firmly, catching mice, earning their keep. But she's lonely, Emma protested. I can tell. How can you tell? Colt asked. Emma considered this seriously. She cries sometimes. At night. I hear her through my window. Nora and Colt exchanged a look over Emma's head. They both knew Emma wasn't really talking about the cat. Tell you what, Colt said. Tomorrow, if the weather holds, we'll go visit the kitten in the barn. Check on her properly. How's that sound? Emma's face lit up. Really? Really? After lunch, Mrs. Alden announced she needed supplies from town, thread, sugar, a few other sundries. Colt offered to go, but the old woman waved him off. You've got ranch work. I'll take the wagon. She turned to Nora. You'll come with me, girl. I need your young eyes to read labels and your strong back to carry packages. Nora nodded, already untying her apron. Of course. They left within the hour, the wagon rattling down the muddy road toward town. Colt watched them go with an odd sense of unease, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was just that he'd gotten used to Nora's presence in the house, used to her quiet efficiency, her calming effect on Emma. He shook off the feeling and took Emma outside to see the real prophet. His daughter's face transformed with joy when the big gelding lowered his head and let her stroke his nose. She wasn't afraid, not even a little. She had her mother's ease with horses. He's beautiful, Emma breathed. Even more beautiful than my toy. He's a good old boy, Colt agreed, running his hand down Prophet's neck. Saved my life more than once out on the trail. How? So Colt told her stories about stampedes and river crossings, about camping under stars so bright they hurt to look at, about the time Prophet stepped on a rattlesnake before it could strike. Emma listened with rapt attention, and for the first time, Colt felt like maybe he could do this. Maybe he could be a father after all. They were heading back to the house, Emma riding on his shoulders, when they heard the wagon returning. But something was wrong. Mrs. Alden was driving too fast, the horses lathered and wild-eyed. And even from a distance, Colt could see the old woman's face was storm-dark with fury. He set Emma down quickly. "Go inside, sweetheart. Find Jack and tell him to come to the house." "But Papa—" "Now, Emma." His daughter ran, sensing the seriousness in his tone. Colt strode toward the wagon as Mrs. Alden pulled the horses to a halt in a spray of mud. "What happened?" he demanded. "Ask her." Mrs. Alden jerked her chin toward Nora, who sat pale and silent beside her. "Ask your precious maid what she's been hiding." Nora's face was sheet white, her hands clenched in her lap. She wouldn't meet Colt's eyes. "Mrs. Alden," Nora started. "Don't." The old woman's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare try to explain." Colt's unease crystallized into dread. "Someone tell me what the hell is going on." Mrs. Alden reached into her bag and pulled out something that gleamed gold in the afternoon sun. Colt's heart sank when he recognized it, his father's pocket watch. The one that had been passed down through 3 generations of Mallory men. The one that should have been in the locked drawer in his father's study. "Found this in her carpet bag," Mrs. Alden said, her voice shaking with rage. "Hidden under her spare dress. Tell me, Mr. Mallory, what reason would a maid have for stealing your dead father's watch?" The world seemed to tilt sideways. Colt looked at Nora, willing her to explain, to give him some reason that would make this make sense, but she just sat there, silent and pale as death. "Nora," he said, and heard the pleading in his own voice. "Tell me you didn't." "I found it in her things when I was looking for my sewing scissors," Mrs. Alden continued relentlessly. "Wrapped in cloth, hidden away like stolen treasure. I knew there was something off about her. Too quiet, too perfect. Nobody's that good without hiding something." "Mrs. Alden, please." Nora's voice was barely a whisper. "Please what? Please don't tell the truth? Please let you rob this family blind after they gave you a home?" The old woman's eyes blazed. "I should have listened to my instincts. Should have known better than to hire a widow with no references except a sad story." "You said you had references," Colt said numbly, "from your previous position." "I lied." Nora's voice was so quiet he barely heard it. "I forged them. I needed the work, and no one hires a woman with nothing." The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. He'd trusted her, brought her into his home, let her near his daughter, let himself start to feel something other than grief when he looked at her. And all along she'd been planning to rob him. "Get out," Mrs. Alden said coldly. "Get your things and get out of this house. Consider yourself lucky I don't have the sheriff arrest you." "Wait!" Colt's voice came out rougher than he intended. He reached for the watch, turned it over in his hands. The engraving on the back was still clear. Thomas Mallory, 1820, his grandfather. The man who'd built this ranch from nothing. He looked at Nora, really looked at her. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging. She just sat there with her spine straight and her hands steady, her gray eyes meeting his without flinching. And something about that steadiness made him pause. "Did you steal this?" he asked quietly. "No." One word, flat and certain. "Then how did it get in your bag?" "I don't know." Mrs. Alden made a disgusted sound. Of course she's going to deny it. What else would a thief say? But Colt was remembering something, a conversation from 2 weeks ago, before he'd come home. Mrs. Alden had written to him about household accounts not adding up. Small amounts gone missing, nothing major, but enough to notice. At the time, he'd assumed it was sloppy bookkeeping. Now he wondered. "When did you discover it missing?" he asked Mrs. Alden. The old woman blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "The watch. When did you realize it was gone from the study?" I don't know exactly. I don't go in there often." "But you went through Nora's things looking for sewing scissors." Colt kept his voice level. "Funny place to look for scissors. The sewing basket's in the parlor." Mrs. Alden's face flushed. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking questions." Colt turned the watch over again. This was locked in my father's desk. The key's on the ring I keep with me. So either Nora picked the lock, which I doubt, given she can barely manage a hairpin, or someone with access to my keys put it in her bag. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Alden's face cycled through shock, then fury, then something that might have been fear. "You're defending her," the old woman said, her voice sharp. "Over me. I've been with this family for 40 years, and you're taking the word of a stranger." "I'm not taking anyone's word. I'm looking at facts." Colt pocketed the watch. "Nora, did you take this?" "No, sir. I swear on my father's grave." "Do you know who did?" "No, sir." Colt believed her. He couldn't say why exactly. Maybe it was the steadiness in her voice, or the way she hadn't tried to manufacture tears or excuses. She just stated the truth and let it stand. He turned to Mrs. Alden. "You're dismissed." The old woman recoiled like he'd struck her. "What? You heard me. Pack your things. I want you off this property by nightfall." "You can't be serious. I've served your family since before you were born." "And I appreciate that. I'll give you 3 months' wages and a letter of reference for your years of loyal service." Colt's voice was hard now, the voice he'd learned giving orders to drovers on long cattle drives. "But I won't have someone in my house who plants evidence to frame another person. That's not loyalty. That's poison." Mrs. Alden's face went purple. "She's bewitched you." "Just like she bewitched that child with her singing and her—" Enough. Colt cut her off. "Emma loves Nora. And Emma's a good judge of character. Better than I am, apparently." "You'll regret this," Mrs. Alden hissed. "Mark my words, boy. That woman's hiding something. And when you find out what, don't come crying to me." She climbed down from the wagon with difficulty, her arthritis making her movements stiff and painful. For just a moment, Colt felt a pang of guilt. She was old, and she'd served his family faithfully for decades, but he'd learned the hard way that past loyalty didn't excuse present betrayal. Mrs. Alden stalked into the house without another word. Colt heard the door slam, then silence. He turned to Nora, who was still sitting in the wagon, looking shell-shocked. "Did you really forge those references?" he asked. "Yes." No hesitation. "Why?" "Because I needed work, and nobody hires a widow with gaps in her employment and no connections." Nora's voice remained steady. "I'm good at what I do. I work hard, but that doesn't matter if you can't get your foot in the door. You could have told me the truth. Would you have hired me if I had?" Probably not. Colt had to admit that. A woman with forged references and a murky past wasn't exactly an ideal employee, no matter how good she was with children. "I should fire you too," he said. "I know." "Send you packing with Mrs. Alden." "Yes, sir." "But I won't." Colt ran a hand through his hair, suddenly exhausted. "You didn't steal that watch. I believe you. And Emma needs you." Something flickered in Nora's expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Mallory." "But no more lies," he said firmly. "Whatever you're running from, whatever you're hiding, I need to know it won't come back to hurt my daughter. Can you promise me that?" Nora met his eyes, and for the first time he saw real fear there. "I can't promise that nothing from my past will follow me, but I can promise I'll never do anything to hurt Emma. She's—" Her voice caught. "She's the best thing in my life right now. The only good thing." The raw honesty in her words hit him square in the chest. He nodded slowly. "All right. That's enough for now." He helped her down from the wagon, his hand steadying her when she stumbled on the muddy ground. For a moment they stood close enough that he could smell the lavender she used to wash her hair, could see the fine lines of worry around her eyes. "Why did Mrs. Alden do it?" Nora asked quietly. "Why frame me?" "I don't know. Maybe she was worried you'd replace her. Maybe she doesn't like change." Colt released her arms, stepped back. "Or maybe she really does think you're hiding something dangerous, and she was trying to protect us in her own twisted way. Am I dangerous?" "I don't think so, but I've been wrong before." They stood in the fading afternoon light, two damaged people trying to figure out if they could trust each other. Above them, a hawk circled, hunting, in the distance, cattle lowed. I should check on Emma, Nora said finally. She'll have heard the commotion. She's probably terrified. Then we'd better go reassure her. They walked to the house together, and Colt found himself grateful for Nora's presence beside him. Whatever complications her past held, whatever secrets she was keeping, right now, in this moment, she was exactly what his broken family needed, even if he couldn't quite explain why. Inside, they found Emma hiding under the kitchen table, her wooden horse clutched to her chest. When she saw Nora, she scrambled out and threw herself into the woman's arms. "I thought you were leaving," Emma sobbed. "I thought Mrs. Alden was sending you away." "Shh, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere." Nora held her tight, rocking slightly. "I'm staying right here with you. Promise?" "I promise." Colt watched them and felt something shift in his chest, something painful and hopeful all at once. This woman who'd lost everything, who'd been accused of theft and nearly thrown out, she was comforting his daughter like it was the most natural thing in the world, like Emma was hers to protect. And maybe, Colt thought, that was exactly what they both needed. A woman who knew how to fight for the people she loved. A woman who'd been through hell and come out singing. Even if he still didn't know the whole truth about Nora May, even if that truth might destroy them all. Mrs. Alden left before sunset, her belongings packed in 2 worn trunks that Jack loaded onto the wagon without comment. She didn't say goodbye to Emma, didn't look back at the house she'd served for 40 years. She just climbed onto the wagon seat with the stiff dignity of the wrongly accused and drove away into the gathering dusk. Colt watched her go from the porch, the envelope with 3 months' wages heavy in his pocket. He'd tried to give it to her, but she'd refused to take it from his hand, so he'd left it on the wagon seat. Blood money, her expression had said. Judas Silver. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was making a terrible mistake trusting Nora over a woman who'd practically raised him. But his gut said otherwise, and Colt had learned to trust his instincts. They'd kept him alive through 2 years of hard traveling and harder drinking. Behind him, the front door opened. Nora stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd been making supper, roasted chicken and potatoes, the kind of simple, honest food that filled a house with warmth. "She's gone then," Nora said quietly. "Yeah." "Do you think she'll be all right?" Colt glanced at her, surprised. After what Mrs. Alden had tried to do, Nora was worried about the old woman's welfare. "She's got family in Austin, a sister. She'll land on her feet." "Good." Nora was silent for a moment, watching the wagon disappear into the distance. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mallory. I never meant to cause trouble in your house." "You didn't cause it. She did." Colt turned to face her fully. "But I need to know something, and I need the truth. All of it. No more half-stories, no more careful omissions. Who are you really, Nora May?" Fear flickered across her face, quick as lightning. Then she squared her shoulders and met his eyes. "Can we talk inside? Emma shouldn't hear this." They found Emma in the parlor playing with her wooden horse and a set of carved animals Jack had made for her, cows and sheep and a tiny dog. She looked up when they entered, her face anxious. "Is Nora staying?" she asked Colt. "Yes, baby, Nora's staying." Relief flooded Emma's features. "Good. I don't want any more people to leave." The words hit Colt like a blow. He knelt beside his daughter, smoothing her dark curls. "I'm not leaving, Emma. Neither is Nora. This is our home and we're staying in it. All of us together. All right?" Emma nodded, but her eyes remained uncertain. Too many promises had been broken in her short life. Words didn't mean much anymore. "Tell you what," Nora said, settling onto the floor beside Emma. "Why don't you show your papa that new game we invented? The one with the animals going to market?" As Emma launched into an elaborate explanation involving sheep economics, Nora caught Colt's eye and mouthed, "After she's asleep." So they waited. They ate supper together, the 3 of them at the big kitchen table that suddenly felt less empty. They played Emma's game until she was yawning. Nora gave her a bath while Colt read through ranch accounts in his father's study, trying to focus on numbers that kept blurring together. Finally, after Emma had been tucked into bed and sung to sleep with that mysterious lullaby that still made Colt's chest ache, Nora came downstairs. She found him on the back porch, watching heat lightning flicker on the horizon. "She's asleep," Nora said. "Went down easy tonight." "That's good." Colt gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit, please." Nora sat, folding her hands in her lap like a student called before the schoolmaster. In the dim light from the kitchen window, her face looked younger, more vulnerable. "I told you my father was hanged for helping Union soldiers," she began. "That was true. What I didn't tell you was his name meant something in Arkansas. Henry May wasn't just a rancher. He was connected. His father had been a territorial judge. His uncle was in Congress. We weren't wealthy like you, but we were respectable, important." Colt listened without interrupting, sensing this was a story that needed to be told straight through. "After they killed him and took our land, my mother and I had nothing, but we had the name. People remembered Henry May, and some of them remembered him kindly." Nora's voice went soft. "There was a lawyer in Little Rock, a man named Samuel Brennan. He'd been my father's friend. He took us in, gave my mother work as his housekeeper. Let me continue my education in his library." "Brennan?" Colt repeated. "Any relation to Jack?" "His younger brother. That's how I ended up here. When my husband died and I needed work, I wrote to Samuel asking if he knew of any positions. He mentioned that his brother was foreman on a big ranch in Texas, and that the owner's housekeeper might need help." Nora's hands tightened in her lap. "Samuel wrote to Jack. Jack mentioned it to Mrs. Alden, and she hired me based on Samuel's recommendation." "So the references weren't entirely forged?" "No, but I embellished them. Made it sound like I'd worked in grand houses, when really I'd just helped my mother with Samuel's household. Made myself sound more experienced than I was." She looked at him directly. "I'm a good worker, Mr. Mallory. Everything I've done for Emma, for this house, that's real. That's me. But I'm not some experienced lady's maid from a fine family. I'm just a widow trying to survive." Colt absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. It wasn't the worst deception. Hell, he'd met plenty of cowboys who'd reinvented themselves completely, taking new names and new histories when they came west. That was part of what the frontier meant, a chance to be someone new. "Why didn't you just tell me this from the start?" "Because I was afraid," Nora said simply. "Afraid you'd send me away. Afraid I'd lose this chance at a new life." She paused. "And there's more." Of course there was. "Go on." "The ranch my father owned, the one that was seized, it bordered a property owned by your grandfather, Thomas Mallory." Nora's voice shook slightly. "In 1862, during the worst of the drought, your grandfather's cattle were dying. His wells had gone dry. My father let him use our water, let his herds graze on our land. It saved the Mallory Ranch. Your grandfather told my father he owed him a debt that could never be repaid." Colt felt the world tilt. "I never knew that." "Why would you? It was before you were born, and after my father died, after everything was taken. I never tried to collect on that debt. What would I have asked for? The Mallorys didn't owe me anything. My father helped because it was the right thing to do, not because he expected payment." "But you knew," Colt said slowly. "When you came here, you knew about the connection." "Yes." Nora met his eyes without flinching. "Samuel told me the story when I asked about positions in Texas. He thought it was ironic, Henry May's daughter working as a maid in the house her father helped save. But I didn't come here to claim anything, Mr. Mallory. I came here because I needed work, and because," her voice caught, "because I thought maybe, on land my father had touched, I could feel close to him again. Stupid, I know." It wasn't stupid. Colt understood that need to feel connected to the dead. Hadn't he avoided Emma for 2 years because she was his last link to Eliza, and that link was too painful to bear? "Does Jack know?" he asked. "About my father and your grandfather?" "I don't know. Samuel might have told him, but I never mentioned it." Nora's shoulders sagged. "I wanted to earn my place here on my own merit, not because of some old debt." Colt stood, paced to the porch railing. The night was thick and warm, heavy with the promise of more rain. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called out, "Hunting." "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "Because you asked for the truth. And because—" Nora rose, came to stand beside him. "Because Mrs. Alden was right about one thing. I am hiding something. Not theft, not anything criminal. But I've been carrying these secrets, and secrets have weight. They make you small. I don't want to be small anymore." Her honesty was like a knife, sharp and clean. Colt found himself admiring her courage even as his mind reeled from the revelations. His family owed hers. The Mallory Ranch existed, at least in part, because of Henry May's generosity, and here was Henry May's daughter, scrubbing his floors and singing his daughter to sleep. "I should have known," he said quietly. "Should have seen it." "How could you? We never met before I came here." "But the song, Eliza's lullaby, you said it felt like it already belonged to you." Colt turned to face her. "That's not coincidence, is it?" Nora's face went pale. "I don't understand." "My grandmother, my father's mother, she was from Arkansas, married my grandfather and came to Texas with him in 1840. Colt's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. "Her maiden name was Catherine May." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. "May," Nora whispered. "That would make us cousins, distant ones, maybe third or fourth, but still blood." Colt laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jesus, you've been family all along and neither of us knew it." Nora sank back into her chair like her legs wouldn't hold her. "My father never mentioned Texas relatives, never mentioned the Mallorys being anything but neighbors. My father never talked much about his mother's family. She died when he was young, and he was raised by my grandfather. But I remember," Colt's voice caught, "I remember her singing that lullaby to me when I was small, before the consumption took her. She said it was a May family song, passed down through the women. She taught it to my mother, who taught it to Eliza. And it came to me through my mother's line," Nora said wonderingly. "The same song, across generations, finding its way back." They stood in the warm night, two people who'd thought they were strangers discovering they were bound by blood and history, and a melody that refused to be forgotten. Colt felt something shift in his understanding of the world. Fate, maybe. Or providence. Or just the strange way life wove patterns that didn't make sense until you stepped back far enough to see them whole. "I need to verify this," he said finally. "There are family records in my father's study. Bible entries, old letters. If Catherine May was my grandmother, it'll be documented. And if it is, if we really are kin, then you're not the maid anymore." Colt's voice was firm. "You're family. And family doesn't scrub floors in their own house." "I don't want charity," Nora said quickly. "I don't want anything I haven't earned." "It's not charity, it's what's right." Colt moved toward the door, then paused. "Thank you for telling me the truth, for trusting me with it. Thank you for believing me about the watch. I almost didn't. But you did. That's what matters." Inside, Colt lit lamps and began pulling records from his father's study. Nora helped, her hands gentle on the old paper and cracked leather. They found the family Bible first, a massive thing with an ornate cover and pages yellowed with age. The births and deaths were recorded in different hands, different inks, spanning back to 1801. And there, in his grandfather's careful script, Catherine Elizabeth May, born 1820, married Thomas Mallory, 1840. "There," Colt breathed. "Catherine May. Your father's, what, aunt, cousin?" "Aunt," Nora said, her finger tracing the faded ink. "My grandfather had two sisters. Catherine was the eldest. She left for Texas and the family lost touch with her. I'd heard stories, but I never knew her married name." They kept searching, finding letters bundled with ribbon, old photographs in tin frames. And finally, in a wooden box tucked in the back of a drawer, they found it. A letter dated 1862, written in a woman's elegant hand. "My dear brother Henry, Thomas asks me to convey his deepest gratitude for your generosity during these difficult times. The water and grazing you've provided have saved our herd, and likely our future. He says he owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid, but I know you well enough to know you'll refuse any talk of payment. You always were the best of us, Henry, the one with the biggest heart. I worry for you there, in the middle of this terrible war. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll survive this madness so we can see each other again. It's been too long, dear brother, too long. Your loving sister, Catherine Mallory." Nora's hands shook as she held the letter. Tears streamed down her face, silent and unstoppable. "She loved him," she whispered. "My father had a sister who loved him, and he never knew what happened to her." She died in 1868, Colt said gently. 6 years after this letter, influenza epidemic. I was only 2. I barely remember her. He was hanged in 1866. He died not knowing if she was alive or dead, if she ever got his letters. Nora's voice broke. All those connections, all that love, just severed by distance and war and... She couldn't continue. The grief was too large, too old and deep. Colt did the only thing he could think of. He pulled her into his arms and let her cry against his chest, her tears soaking through his shirt, while she mourned for all the lost connections, all the family that had been scattered by history's cruel hand. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't..." "Shh. You've got every right in the world." They stood like that for a long time, surrounded by the ghosts of their shared past, until Nora's sobs quieted to hiccups and then to silence. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but there was something lighter in her expression, something unburdened. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we tell Emma she's got an aunt," Colt said. "A real blood relation, not just a maid who's good with children. And we figure out what that means for all of us. I still don't want charity, and I'm still not offering it. But Nora, you've been sleeping in the servants' quarters. That ends tonight. There are 3 guest rooms on the 2nd floor, all of them bigger and better furnished. Pick one." "Mr. Mallory." "Colt. Call me Colt. We're family, remember?" That won him a small, watery smile. "This is all too strange, too much like a fever dream." "Tell me about it." Colt gathered up the letters and papers, handling them carefully. "But it's real, all of it, and maybe it's what we both needed. You, me, Emma. Maybe we're supposed to be helping each other. Or maybe we're all just lost souls who bumped into each other in the dark. That too." The next morning dawned clear and hot, the kind of September day that reminded you summer wasn't done with Texas yet. Colt woke early and found Nora already in the kitchen, but this time she wasn't cooking. She was sitting at the table with Emma, showing her the old photograph they'd found, a formal portrait of Catherine May Mallory, stern and beautiful in her wedding dress. "That's your great-great-grandmother," Nora was saying, "your papa's grandmother, and she was my father's sister, which makes you and me..." "Family," Emma breathed, her eyes wide. "Real family." "Real family." Emma turned to Colt, who'd been standing in the doorway watching. "Papa, is it true? Is Nora our family?" "It's true, sweetheart." Colt came into the room, accepting the coffee Nora poured for him with a grateful nod. "Turns out we've been kin all along. We just didn't know it." "Then she can't leave," Emma declared. "Family doesn't leave." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a 2-year-old wound. Colt and Nora exchanged a look over Emma's head. "No, baby," Colt said gently. "Family doesn't leave. Not if they can help it." The day unfolded with a strange new ease. Jack came to the house for his daily report and was told about the discovery. He'd known, it turned out. Samuel had mentioned the connection in his letter, but he'd kept quiet, figuring it was Nora's story to tell. "Wondered how long it would take you two to figure it out," Jack said with a rare smile. "Samuel said you were sharp, Miss Nora." "Guess he was right." "Not sharp enough to see it sooner," Nora replied. "I should have asked about the family history, should have put the pieces together." "Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us till we're ready to see it," Jack said, his eyes moving meaningfully between Nora and Colt. "That's just how people are made." They were still figuring out the new arrangement when a rider came up the road around noon. The man was young, maybe 20, with a deputy's star pinned to his vest and a nervous expression on his face. "Mr. Mallory?" he called from his horse. "I need to speak with you, sir. Official business." Colt's gut clenched. He stepped off the porch, very aware of Nora and Emma watching from the doorway. "I'm Mallory. What's this about?" "There's been a complaint filed, sir, about a woman working here, Nora May. Mrs. Rebecca Alden claims she was wrongfully dismissed and that Miss May is a thief." The deputy pulled out a folded paper. "I've got a warrant here to search the premises and question Miss May about stolen property." The world narrowed to a single point of fury. "Mrs. Alden filed charges?" "Yes, sir. Last night, soon as she got to town. Judge issued the warrant this morning." The deputy looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mallory. I know your family. This ain't personal, but I've got to do my job. Colt felt Nora come up beside him. Her face was pale but composed. I understand, Deputy. What do you need from me? Just to search your quarters, ma'am, and ask you some questions about a gold pocket watch Mrs. Alden says you stole. I didn't steal anything, Nora said clearly. The watch was planted in my belongings to frame me. Mr. Mallory recovered it, and it's back in his possession. The deputy glanced at Colt. That true, sir? Every word. Colt pulled the watch from his pocket. This is my father's watch. It was locked in his desk. Someone put it in Miss May's carpet bag. Someone who had access to my keys. Mrs. Alden was trying to get rid of her, and when I chose to believe Miss May instead, she decided to make trouble. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Mallory. And what Mrs. Alden did is a crime. Filing false charges, manufacturing evidence. Colt's voice was hard. You want to arrest someone, Deputy? Arrest her. The young man looked deeply uncomfortable. I still have to follow through on the warrant, sir. Judge's orders. Fine. Search whatever you need to search. But I'm telling you right now, you won't find anything, because Nora May isn't a thief. She's family. That caused the deputy's eyebrows to rise. Family, sir? My father's cousin, as it turns out. Distant relation, but blood nonetheless. And in my house, we protect our own. The search was brief and thorough. The deputy went through Nora's old quarters in the servants' wing, then her new room on the second floor. He found nothing but clothing, a few books, and a small wooden box containing letters from her late husband. I'm satisfied she's not hiding stolen goods, the deputy said finally. And given your testimony, Mr. Mallory, I don't see grounds to pursue charges. He tucked his notebook away. But Mrs. Alden's going to make noise about this in town. Might get ugly. Let her make noise. The truth is the truth. After the deputy left, Colt found Nora in the kitchen, her hands braced on the counter, her shoulders shaking. He thought she was crying until he got closer and realized she was laughing, harsh, slightly hysterical laughter that bordered on sobs. She really did it, Nora gasped out. She actually filed charges. I could have been arrested. But you weren't, and you won't be. Colt put his hands on her shoulders, turning her to face him. Listen to me. Mrs. Alden can make all the accusations she wants. She's got no proof, no evidence, just spite. Spite can ruin a person's reputation, Colt. You know that. Nora's eyes were wild. By tomorrow, everyone in town will have heard I'm a thief. No one will care that it's not true. Then we make them care. We tell them you're family. We show them the proof. And if they don't believe it, if they think I'm just some woman who seduced the grieving widower and convinced him we're related, the words hit Colt like cold water. Because that's exactly what people would think. He could see it now, the knowing looks, the whispers. Poor Colt Mallory, so broken by grief he can't see he's being manipulated. That pretty maid's got her hooks in him good. Then they're fools, he said firmly. And I don't give a damn what fools think. But Emma will. Children are cruel, Colt. They'll say things to her about me, about us. They'll make her ashamed. She was right, and they both knew it. In a small town like this, reputation was everything. And Mrs. Alden had just poisoned Nora's with a few well-placed words. Colt made a decision. Then we go to town ourselves, today. We take the evidence, the Bible, the letters, all of it. We go to Judge Harrison and we present our case. We make it official and public that you're my cousin, that you're living here as family, not as hired help. And we file countercharges against Mrs. Alden for filing a false report. That will only make things worse, or it'll make them better. Either way, we're not hiding. We're not acting like we've got something to be ashamed of. Colt's voice was fierce. You've done nothing wrong, Nora. Nothing. And I'll be damned if I let some bitter old woman destroy you because she couldn't control me. Nora searched his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right. We fight. We fight. They went to town that afternoon, the three of them, Colt, Nora, and Emma. They brought the family Bible, the letters, the photograph. Judge Harrison was a fair man, a friend of Colt's father, and he listened to their story with grave attention. This is quite a tale, he said when they'd finished. But the evidence is compelling. Catherine May Mallory was indeed your grandmother, Colt. And if Henry May was her brother, then Miss Nora here is legitimately your relative. Then you'll dismiss the charges? I already have. The deputy's report made it clear there was no stolen property, and your testimony about the watch being in your possession was persuasive. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair. But Mr. Mallory, Mrs. Alden's version of events is spreading through town like wildfire. People are talking. Let them talk. They're saying Miss May has bewitched you, that she's using your grief and your daughter to secure her position. Then they're saying I'm a fool who can't tell truth from manipulation, Colt said coldly. Anyone who knows me knows better. Do they? The judge's eyes were kind but firm. You left for 2 years, son. People don't know you anymore. They don't know what grief did to you, or who you are now that you're back. All they see is a widower who came home and immediately fired his longtime housekeeper in favor of a pretty young maid. You see how that looks? Beside him, Colt felt Nora flinch. He reached over and took her hand, right there in the judge's office where anyone could see. Let them talk about that too. I see how it looks to small minds, Colt said, but I can't live my life worried about gossip. Emma needs Nora. Hell, I need Nora. She's family, and she's staying. That's final. Judge Harrison sighed. Then I wish you luck, son. You're going to need it. They left the courthouse and walked through town, very aware of the stares following them. People whispered behind their hands. Shopkeepers watched from doorways. Colt kept his head high and his hand steady on Emma's shoulder, silently daring anyone to say something to his face. No one did. They never did. Cowards with wagging tongues and no backbone. They were almost back to the wagon when a voice called out, "Mr. Mallory! A word, if you please." Colt turned to find a woman approaching, tall and elegant, maybe 50 years old with silver streaking through her dark hair. He recognized her after a moment. Judith Lane, an old friend of his mother's, a widow who ran one of the largest cattle operations in the county. "Mrs. Lane," he said, nodding respectfully. "Good to see you." "And you?" Mrs. Lane's sharp eyes moved from Colt to Nora to Emma and back again. "I've been hearing interesting stories today. Thought I'd get the truth from the source before I formed an opinion." "The truth is simple," Colt said. "This is Nora May, my cousin. She's come to live with us as family." "Cousin?" Mrs. Lane's lips curved in a slight smile. "Through Catherine May Mallory? You knew her?" "We were friends, years ago. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, sharp as a tack, kind as summer rain. She used to talk about her family back in Arkansas. Had a brother named Henry she dearly loved." "Mrs." Lane extended her hand to Nora. "I'm pleased to meet Henry May's daughter. Your father was a good man. He died for doing what was right, and that takes courage most people don't have." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "You knew my father?" "Only by reputation, but Catherine's letters spoke of him often. She grieved when news of his death finally reached her." Mrs. Lane's expression softened. "She would have been glad to know you found your way here, to know the family's reconnected." "Thank you," Nora whispered. "You have no idea what that means to me." "I have some idea." Mrs. Lane turned back to Colt. "There's going to be talk, Mr. Mallory. You know that." "I know. Some of it will be ugly. Rebecca Alden has friends, and they're already spreading poison. Let them. They'll say Miss May trapped you, that she's after your money, your land. They'll make her life miserable if they can." Mrs. Lane paused. "But they'll have to go through me first, and I don't fall over easy." The relief Colt felt was almost physical. Judith Lane's word carried weight in this county. If she vouched for Nora, others would follow. "I appreciate that, ma'am. More than I can say." "Don't thank me yet. I'm going to be watching, Mr. Mallory. Watching to make sure you treat this young woman with the respect due to family, and watching to make sure she earns that respect." Mrs. Lane's eyes drilled into both of them. "Grief makes people do strange things, makes them see connections that aren't there, find comfort in places they shouldn't. I'm choosing to believe you both are acting in good faith. Don't make me regret it." "We won't," Colt promised. After Mrs. Lane left, they climbed into the wagon in silence. Emma curled up between them, tired from the long day. As Colt guided the horses toward home, Nora finally spoke. "That could have gone worse. Could have gone better too. At least we've got one ally. One's better than none." Colt glanced at her. "You holding up all right?" "Honestly, I don't know. Today's been—" She laughed shakily. "I woke up this morning a maid facing theft charges. Now I'm a cousin with one friend in a town full of enemies. I'm not sure if that's an improvement. It is, Colt said firmly, because now you're not alone. You've got me and Emma. That counts for something. Does it? When that something might destroy your reputation. My reputation can handle it. I'm a Mallory. People need us too much to completely turn on us. He said it with more confidence than he felt. Besides, I stopped caring what people thought about me 2 years ago when I left my daughter behind and rode off like a coward. After that, what's left to ruin? Nora didn't answer, just reached over and squeezed his hand briefly before folding hers back in her lap. They rode the rest of the way in silence, watching the sun sink toward the hills. But as they pulled up to the house, Colt saw something that made his blood run cold. The barn door stood open, swinging in the breeze, and inside he could see smoke rising. "Fire," he said, his voice sharp. "Nora, take Emma to the house. Now." "But, now?" He was already jumping from the wagon, running toward the barn. Behind him he heard Nora urging the horses forward, heard Emma crying. But his focus was on the barn, on the smoke that was getting thicker, darker. Someone had set this fire deliberately. He could smell the kerosene. And somewhere in the chaos of flames and smoke and fear, Colt heard a child screaming. Emma had followed him. His daughter had disobeyed and followed him into danger. And now she was trapped inside the burning barn. Colt's heart stopped. The scream came again, high and terrified, cutting through the roar of flames like a knife. But it wasn't Emma's voice. It was higher, younger, the kitten. The barn cat Emma had been begging to bring inside. He turned to see Emma struggling in Nora's arms on the porch, reaching toward the barn with desperate hands. "The baby," she sobbed. "Papa, the baby cat. She's in there." Relief and terror warred in Colt's chest. His daughter was safe. But she was watching him, waiting to see what he would do, waiting to see if he was the kind of man who saved helpless things or the kind who let them burn. He grabbed a horse blanket from the fence, dunked it in the water trough, and wrapped it around his shoulders. Then he plunged into the smoke. The heat hit him like a wall. Flames licked up the walls where hay bales were stacked, fed by kerosene that made the fire burn hot and fast. Whoever had set this blaze had wanted to make sure it took. Through the smoke, Colt could see the small gray shape of the kitten huddled in the corner, mewling in terror. He moved fast, his eyes streaming, his lungs burning. The barn's main support beam groaned above him, a sound he knew too well. The structure was going to collapse. He had seconds, not minutes. Colt scooped up the kitten, tucked it against his chest, and turned to run. That's when he saw it. A flash of fabric near the tack room. Someone was in here with him. Someone who'd been hiding, waiting. The figure bolted toward the back door, but Colt was faster. He grabbed a fistful of shirt and yanked hard, spinning the intruder around. Through the smoke, he recognized the young face. Danny Pike, Vernon Pike's nephew, barely 17 years old. "You did this," Colt growled. "You set this fire." Danny's eyes were wild with fear. "Mr. Pike said, he said you needed to learn." The beam groaned again, louder this time. There was no time for this. Colt shoved Danny toward the door. Bumped. "Get out. Now. We'll finish this conversation when we're not about to die." They burst out of the barn together just as the roof caved in with a roar like thunder. Colt stumbled, fell to his knees, gasping for air that didn't taste like smoke and death. The kitten in his arms yowled and scratched, but he held on tight. Nora was there instantly, pulling him away from the flames, her hands checking him for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Colt, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." His voice came out as a rasp. "Danny Pike set the fire. Vernon Pike's behind it." Jack appeared with 3 ranch hands, all of them armed with buckets. But the barn was already a loss. All they could do was wet down the surrounding buildings and pray the wind didn't shift. Danny tried to run, but Jack caught him by the collar and hauled him back like a disobedient pup. "Oh no, boy. You're not going anywhere. You just committed arson on private property." "I didn't mean for it to get so big." Danny's voice cracked. "Uncle Vernon said just scare them a little. Make Mr. Mallory think twice about—" "About what?" Colt demanded, getting to his feet. "About standing up to your uncle's land grab? About protecting what's mine? He said you weren't strong enough to run this place anymore. Said you'd gone soft, letting a woman make your decisions. Danny looked miserable, tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. He said, if we made enough trouble, you'd sell cheap and leave Texas. The rage that filled Colt was cold and precise. Vernon Pike had been testing him, pushing boundaries, and now he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This was war. Jack, tie him up, Colt ordered. We're taking him to the sheriff, and then we're paying Vernon Pike a visit. Colt, wait! Nora's voice cut through his fury. She was holding Emma now, the little girl clutching the rescued kitten to her chest. You're in no shape to ride anywhere. Look at yourself. Colt looked down. His shirt was burned through in places. His hands were blistered, and he could feel the sting of a dozen small burns on his arms and face. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving pain in its wake. I don't care. Pike needs to answer for this. And he will, but not tonight. Tonight, you need a doctor. Nora's voice was firm, brooking no argument. Emma's terrified. The barn's still burning. Running off half-cocked isn't going to help anyone. She was right. Damn her. Colt's hands were shaking now, his legs unsteady. The smoke inhalation was catching up to him, making his chest tight and his vision blur. Fine, he conceded. But first thing tomorrow, I'm going after Pike. First thing tomorrow, Nora agreed. Now come inside before you fall down. They made it to the house, Danny Pike trussed up in the tack shed under Jack's watchful guard. The hands formed a bucket brigade to keep the fire from spreading, but there was nothing left of the barn except a skeletal frame of charred timber and ash. Inside, Nora worked with the efficiency of a field surgeon. She cleaned Colt's burns with water and vinegar, wrapped his hands in clean linen, and made him drink willow bark tea for the pain. Emma sat on his lap the whole time, the kitten purring in her arms, refusing to let either of them out of her sight. You saved her, Emma whispered. You ran into the fire and saved her. Of course I did. You asked me to. But you could have died. Emma's voice was very small. Like Mama died. Colt's chest constricted. He wrapped his good arm around his daughter and pulled her close. I'm not going anywhere, baby. It takes more than a fire to get rid of me. Promise? Promise. Emma buried her face in his chest, and Colt felt her tears soaking through his shirt for the second time in a week. Above her head, he met Nora's eyes. She looked exhausted, worried, and something else, something tender that made his heart skip. Thank you, he mouthed. She just shook her head and went back to mixing another poultice. By the time the doctor arrived, summoned by one of the hands, Colt's burns had been cleaned and dressed, and he was feeling almost human again. Doc Morrison, a gruff man in his 60s who'd delivered half the county, examined him thoroughly and pronounced him lucky. Could have been much worse, Morrison said, packing away his instruments. Your lungs are clear, the burns are superficial. You'll be sore for a few days, but you'll live. Good to know. Though I hear it wasn't the fire that nearly killed you, it was stupidity. Running into a burning building for a cat? Morrison shook his head. You've got a daughter who needs you, Mallory. Maybe think twice before playing hero next time. Next time someone sets fire to my property, I'll keep that in mind. After the doctor left, Colt found Nora in the kitchen making supper. Emma was finally asleep upstairs, exhausted from fear and tears, the kitten curled up beside her, despite Mrs. Alden's old rule about barn cats staying in barns. You should rest, Nora said without looking up from the stove. You've been through hell today. So have you. I wasn't the one who ran into a burning building. No, but you kept your head while everyone else was panicking. You took care of Emma, took care of me. That takes a different kind of courage. Colt eased himself into a chair, his body protesting every movement. I don't know what I would have done without you today. Nora finally turned to face him. In the lamplight, he could see the worry etched into her features, the way her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. I was so afraid, she admitted. When you ran into that barn, I thought I was going to watch another person I cared about die. And I couldn't bear it, Colt. I couldn't bear losing someone else. The raw honesty in her voice stripped away every pretense between them. They weren't employer and employee, weren't distant cousins trying to figure out a family connection. They were two broken people who'd found something unexpected in each other, comfort, maybe, or hope. or the beginning of something neither of them was ready to name. "I'm sorry I scared you," Colt said quietly, "but I had to go in." Emma was watching. She needed to know. His voice caught. She needed to know I wouldn't abandon something helpless, that I wouldn't run away when things got hard. "You're not that man anymore. The one who ran." "Aren't I?" "Some days I'm not sure. Some days I wake up and the first thing I think is how easy it would be to saddle Prophet and just keep riding." "But you don't." Nora came to sit across from him. "That's what matters. You stay. You fight. You run into burning buildings for orphaned kittens." She smiled slightly. "You're a good man, Colt Mallory, better than you give yourself credit for. And you're a good woman, better than this town deserves." They sat in the quiet kitchen, the only sound the tick of the clock and the distant settling of the ruined barn. Outside, the hands were still watching for sparks, making sure the fire didn't reignite. But inside felt safe, felt like home. "What are you going to do about Vernon Pike?" Nora asked finally. "What I should have done weeks ago. I'm going to make it clear that pushing Mallory land is a mistake he won't make twice." Colt's voice was hard. "He sent a boy to burn my barn. Next time it could be the house, could be Emma's room. I can't let that stand." "Will there be violence?" "I hope not. But if there is, I won't shy from it." Nora nodded slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "Colt." "No, it's too dangerous. Pike's already shown he's willing to commit arson. I won't put you in his line of fire." "And I won't sit here wondering if you're coming home," Nora shot back. "I've done that too many times, sat and waited and worried, while men I loved rode off to face danger. I won't do it again, not when I can help." "How exactly would you help? This is ranch business, Nora, men's business." The look she gave him could have curdled milk. "Don't you dare pull that with me. I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting. I've survived things that would break most men. I can handle Vernon Pike." "It's not about what you can handle. Then what is it about? Control? Pride?" Nora leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Or is it that you're afraid to let anyone close enough to matter? Afraid that if you let yourself need someone, they'll leave you like Eliza did?" The words hit like a physical blow. Colt recoiled, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You've been keeping me at arm's length since the day we met, Colt. Calling me the maid, keeping everything formal and distant. Even after we found out we're family, you're still holding back, still treating me like I'm temporary." "Because maybe you are." The words came out harsher than he intended. "Maybe tomorrow you'll realize this life isn't what you signed up for. That living on a ranch with a broken widower and his traumatized daughter is too hard, too complicated, and then you'll leave, just like everyone else leaves, and Emma will be devastated. I'll be—" He couldn't finish. "You'll be what?" Nora's voice gentled. "Devastated too?" Colt looked away, his jaw tight. He couldn't answer that, couldn't admit how much her presence had come to mean to him in just a few short weeks. Couldn't face the terrifying truth that somewhere along the way, Nora May had stopped being just the maid or just the cousin and had become something infinitely more dangerous, someone he was starting to love. "I'm not leaving," Nora said quietly. "I told Emma I wouldn't, and I meant it. I told you I wouldn't, and I meant that too. Whatever's happening here, between all of us, it's real, and it's worth fighting for. So tomorrow, when you ride out to face Vernon Pike, I'm riding with you. Not because I need to prove anything, but because we're family. And family stands together." The conviction in her voice broke something loose in Colt's chest. He'd been alone for so long, carrying everything by himself, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone beside him. Someone who chose to stay. "All right," he said finally. "You can come. But you stay behind me, and if things get ugly, you get yourself out. Promise me." "I promise." They shook on it, their hands clasping across the table. And for just a moment, Colt let himself imagine what it would be like if this was permanent. If every night ended with Nora across the table from him, and every morning began with her singing in the kitchen. If Emma could grow up with both a father and someone who loved her like a mother. If he could let himself be happy again without feeling like he was betraying Eliza's memory. The thought scared him more than the fire had. The next morning dawned gray and cool, autumn finally asserting itself. Colt's hands were stiff and sore, but he could manage reins well enough. He dressed in his best clothes: black trousers, white shirt, his father's vest, the kind of outfit that said he was here for serious business. Nora appeared in a dark blue riding dress that had seen better days, but was clean and pressed. Her hair was pulled back severely, and there was steel in her eyes that Colt recognized. She was ready for a fight. Emma wanted to come too, but Colt was firm. "You stay here with Jack, sweetheart. We'll be back before supper." "But what if you don't come back? What if the bad man hurts you?" Colt knelt down, ignoring the protest from his burned skin. "I will come back, I promise. And when I do, we'll give that kitten a proper name. You think about what you want to call her while I'm gone, all right?" Emma nodded reluctantly, then threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Papa. I love you too, baby. More than anything." They rode out together, Colt on Prophet and Nora on a gentle mare named Honey. The Pike Ranch was an hour's ride northeast, through rolling hills and across the disputed creek that had started this whole mess. As they rode, Colt found himself studying Nora. She sat a horse well, her back straight and her hands confident on the reins. There was so much about her he didn't know, so many layers he hadn't uncovered, but he wanted to. God help him, he wanted to know everything. "Why did you really come here?" he asked suddenly. "I know what you told me, about needing work, about feeling connected to your father's memory. But there's something else, isn't there? Something you're not saying." Nora was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then finally, she spoke. "After my husband died, I was alone for the first time in my life. Truly alone. No parents, no family, no one who cared if I lived or died. And I realized I was tired of being alone. Tired of being the person things happened to, with no control, no voice. I wanted to matter to someone, to belong somewhere." She glanced at him. "When Samuel told me about the Mallory Ranch, about this family my father had helped save, I thought maybe that could be my place. Maybe I could matter here." "You do," Colt said, the words coming out more intense than he intended. "You matter to Emma. You matter to—" He stopped himself. "To?" Nora prompted gently. "To all of us," he finished, the coward's answer. But Nora smiled like she heard what he didn't say. They reached the Pike Ranch just before noon. It was smaller than Mallory Land, a two-story house that needed paint, corrals that needed mending, the look of a place slowly losing its fight with poverty. Vernon Pike met them on the porch, a rifle cradled in his arms. He was a big man, 50 years old and hard as nails, with mean eyes and a meaner reputation. "Mallory," Pike said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Heard you had some trouble last night. Shame about your barn." "Was it?" Colt dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. "Funny thing about that fire, Pike. Your nephew was there. In fact, he started it." Pike's expression didn't change. "Boy's always been prone to foolishness, but I can't be held responsible for every stupid thing my kin does." "Can't you?" "Because Danny said you sent him. Said you wanted to scare me into selling my land cheap." "Boy's a liar then, looking to shift blame." Pike shifted the rifle slightly. "Even if I did say something, which I'm not admitting, it's no more than you deserve. Coming back here after 2 years, acting like you've got some right to that creek water. Your daddy and I had an agreement about boundaries. An agreement he never signed. An agreement that dies with him." Colt's voice was cold. "The creek is on Mallory land, always has been, and I've got the deed to prove it." "Deeds can be wrong. Surveys make mistakes." "Not this one. My grandfather had it done by the territorial surveyor in 1845. It's been filed with the county for 33 years. Pike's jaw tightened. "You trying to tell me I've been watering my cattle on your land all this time? I'm telling you that your claim has no legal standing, and sending your nephew to burn my property was the act of a desperate man who knows it." Colt took a step closer. "Here's what's going to happen, Pike. You're going to pay for rebuilding my barn. You're going to keep your cattle on your side of the creek, and you're going to tell the whole county that the Mallorys are not to be trifled with. Do that, and I'll convince the sheriff not to press charges against Danny. Boy's young. He can still turn out decent if he gets away from your influence." "And if I refuse?" Then I take you to court, bankrupt you with legal fees, and take your ranch when you can't pay. Your choice." The two men stared at each other, the air thick with the promise of violence. Colt could see Pike calculating, weighing his options. The man was prideful, but he wasn't stupid. He knew Colt was serious, knew the Mallorys had the money and the connections to make good on the threat. Finally, Pike spat into the dirt. $500 for the barn, not a penny more. 1,000. That barn was solid oak. $750 and you drop any charges against Danny. Done. Colt pulled out the paper he'd brought, already drawn up by Judge Harrison. Sign this agreement. It states you acknowledge Mallory ownership of the creek and agree to pay $750 in restitution. Once you sign, Danny's free to go. Pike read it slowly, his lips moving over the words. Then, with visible reluctance, he signed his name in a heavy scrawl. "There," he said, shoving the paper back at Colt. "We're square." "Not quite." Colt folded the paper carefully. "One more thing. The woman with me, that's my cousin, Nora May. She's family. And if I hear you or anyone in this county has spoken ill of her, spread rumors, or made her life difficult in any way, this agreement is void and I come after you with everything I've got. Understood?" Pike's eyes moved to Nora for the first time, taking her in with an expression that made Colt's hands clench. "That the maid everyone's talking about? The one who's got you all twisted up?" "That's my cousin," Colt repeated, his voice dangerous. "Family. Say you understand, Pike." "I understand." Pike smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Though I'll say this, Mallory. Man who lets a woman dictate his business is a man who won't last long in this country. Your daddy would be ashamed." The punch came before Colt could think about it. His fist connected with Pike's jaw, sending the bigger man stumbling back. The rifle clattered to the porch. Pike came up spitting blood, murder in his eyes. "You son of a—" Nora's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Pike, I suggest you stay down." Both men turned to see her sitting calmly on her horse, a small pistol in her hand. It was pointed directly at Pike's chest, and her hand didn't shake. "Where the hell did you get that?" Colt demanded. "Brought it from inside. You boys were so busy measuring each other you didn't notice me dismount." Nora's eyes stayed on Pike. "Here's what you need to understand, Mr. Pike. I'm not some helpless woman who needs defending. I'm Henry May's daughter. My father faced down a lynch mob without flinching. I've got that same blood, that same spine. So when you talk about Mr. Mallory being twisted up by a woman, what you're really saying is you're afraid of a woman who won't bow down to you. That's your weakness, not his." The silence that followed was absolute. Pike stared at Nora like he'd never seen a woman before. Colt felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly staggered him. "Now," Nora continued, "we're going to leave. You're going to keep your word about the money and the creek. And you're going to remember that the Mallorys don't fight alone anymore. They've got family. And family can be a fearsome thing. Are we clear?" Pike wiped blood from his mouth and nodded slowly. "Clear." "Good." Nora lowered the pistol but didn't put it away. "Come on, Colt. Emma's waiting." They rode away without looking back. A mile down the road, when they were safely out of sight, Colt finally spoke. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me. Said a woman alone needed to know how to protect herself." Nora finally tucked the pistol, unloaded, Colt would bet, back into her saddlebag. "I wasn't going to let him hurt you. Not after everything. You could have been killed. So could you. That's what family does. We protect each other, even when it's dangerous." She looked at him steadily. "That's what love does too, though I suppose it's too soon to call it that." Colt's heart stopped. "Nora, I'm not asking for anything," she interrupted quickly. "I know you're not ready. I know you're still grieving, still healing, but I need you to know what I feel for you, it's real. It's not gratitude or loneliness or some calculation to secure my place here. It's just what it is. And I can wait until you're ready to feel something back. If you ever are." The words hung between them like a confession. Colt's mind reeled. He should say something. Should tell her she was wrong, that he couldn't offer her what she deserved, that his heart was too broken to love anyone again. But the words wouldn't come, because they'd be lies. "I'm scared," he admitted instead. Scared of what I'm starting to feel. Scared that if I let myself care about you the way I'm beginning to, I'll lose you too. And I don't think I could survive that again. You don't know you'll lose me. I don't know I won't. Then that's called faith, Colt, and faith is just another word for courage. Nora's smile was sad and sweet. Think about it. That's all I ask. Just think about what we could be if we were brave enough to try. They rode the rest of the way home in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd said difficult truths and were giving each other space to absorb them. When they reached the ranch, Emma ran out to meet them, the kitten bouncing along beside her. You came back! You both came back! Colt swung down from Prophet and caught his daughter up in his arms. Burns be damned. Told you I would. Did you beat the bad man? We came to an understanding. The barn will be rebuilt, and Mr. Pike won't bother us anymore. Because Papa punched him, Nora added with a grin. Right in the jaw. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Really. Though we're not going to make a habit of solving problems with our fists, Colt said, shooting Nora a look. Violence is a last resort. But sometimes last resorts are necessary, Nora countered. That's an important lesson too. They were teasing now, the tension from earlier dissipating into something warmer. Emma giggled, delighted to see them acting like a real family, like people who belonged together. That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Colt found himself drawn to the family Bible again. He opened it to the page with Catherine May Mallory's name and traced the faded ink with one bandaged finger. His grandmother had loved a brother named Henry. That brother had saved the Mallory ranch. And now Henry's daughter was here, singing old songs and teaching Emma to be brave, and making Colt feel things he'd thought died with Eliza. Maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe it was something bigger, fate or providence, or just the strange way the universe balanced its books. His family had been given a gift once, and now they were giving something back. A home, a place to belong, a second chance at happiness for a woman who'd lost everything, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance for him too. If he could find the courage to take it. The weeks that followed Vernon Pike's surrender brought a change to the Mallory Ranch that was harder to name than see. It wasn't just the new barn going up, timber frame by timber frame, paid for with Pike's money and built by hands who worked with renewed purpose. It wasn't just Emma's laughter returning, or the way she followed Nora everywhere like a shadow, or how she'd named the kitten Hope, because that's what Papa found when he found you. It was something quieter, something that lived in the spaces between words. It was the way Colt found himself lingering in the kitchen while Nora cooked, ostensibly checking accounts but really just listening to her hum. It was how their hands would brush when passing plates at supper, and neither of them would pull away quite as fast as they should. It was the look that would pass between them over Emma's head, a look that said, "We're building something here, aren't we?" But Colt still hadn't answered Nora's confession. Still hadn't found the words to match the feelings growing in his chest like wildflowers after rain. And with each passing day, the silence between them grew heavier, more charged with things unsaid. October deepened into November. The air turned crisp, and the leaves on the live oaks began their slow fade from green to gold. Emma turned 3 years old with a party that included Jack and the ranch hands, Judith Lane and her family, and a handful of other neighbors who'd decided that maybe the Mallorys weren't as scandalous as rumor suggested. Nora baked a cake, 3 layers with honey frosting, and Emma's face, when she saw the candles, was worth every ounce of sugar it took. They sang and ate and watched Emma open presents, and for a few hours the house felt full in a way it hadn't since Eliza died. But as the guests departed and twilight settled over the hills, Colt felt the old restlessness return. The sense that he was standing at a crossroads, and whichever path he chose would change everything. He found Nora in the kitchen later that evening, washing dishes in the basin. Emma was already asleep upstairs, exhausted from her special day. Through the window, Colt could see the new barn silhouetted against the darkening sky, a testament to survival, to fighting back, to refusing to let fear win. "Today was good," Nora said without turning around. Emma was so happy. "Because of you. You made it special for her." "We made it special. You, me, everyone who came." Nora set down the plate she was washing and finally turned to face him. "That's what family does, Colt. They show up. They celebrate the good days and endure the bad ones together. Is that what we are now? Family? I don't know. You tell me. There was no accusation in her voice, just honest curiosity. Because we've been dancing around this for weeks now, and I'm tired of pretending I don't see it. Tired of acting like there's nothing between us except shared blood from 3 generations back. Colt's heart hammered against his ribs. Nora, do you know what tomorrow is? She interrupted. November 5th. 2 years to the day since Eliza died. I looked it up in the family Bible. Wanted to know if you'd need space, need silence, need anything. The breath left Colt's lungs in a rush. He'd been trying not to think about the anniversary, trying to pretend it was just another day. But of course Nora had noticed. Of course she'd prepared herself to support him through it. I don't know what I need, he admitted. I don't know how to grieve her without feeling like I'm betraying her. And I don't know how to move forward without feeling like I'm leaving her behind. Nora crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough that he could smell the lavender in her hair. Can I tell you something my mother told me after my father died? She said, grief isn't something you move past. It's something you carry with you. It changes shape over time, gets lighter or heavier depending on the day, but it never fully leaves. And that's all right. That's how it should be. The people we love deserve to be carried. But how do I carry Eliza and still have room for... He couldn't finish. Couldn't say for you out loud. Love isn't a finite resource, Colt. Your heart isn't a house with only so many rooms. It's bigger than you think. Strong enough to hold grief and joy at the same time. Strong enough to remember Eliza and still let yourself feel something for someone else. Nora's eyes searched his face. If you want to, that is. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm not trying to erase what you had. I'm just here, and I'm willing to wait until you figure out if there's space for me too. The words cracked something open in Colt's chest, some barrier he'd built around his heart to keep it safe. I'm afraid, he whispered. Afraid that if I love you, I'll lose you. Afraid that happiness is something I'm not allowed to have anymore. Why wouldn't you be allowed? Because I left Emma. Because I was a coward who ran away when she needed me most. What kind of man does that? What kind of man deserves a second chance? A human one. Nora's voice was fierce now. A broken one who did his best with an impossible situation. You think you're the first person to handle grief badly? To make mistakes? Colt, you came back. You faced your demons and you came home. That's not cowardice, that's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It never does. Courage feels like being terrified and doing the thing anyway. Nora reached up and cupped his face in her work-roughened hands. I'm terrified too. Terrified that I'm reading this wrong, that you'll never see me as anything but the maid or the cousin. Terrified that I've let myself fall in love with a man who can't love me back because his heart is still buried on a hillside with his wife. But I'm doing it anyway. That's what courage looks like. Colt stared at her. At this woman who'd survived so much and still had the strength to be vulnerable, and felt the last of his resistance crumble. You're not reading it wrong, he said hoarsely. God help me, Nora. You're not reading it wrong at all. Then he kissed her. It wasn't like kissing Eliza. It was different, softer, more tentative, flavored with grief and hope in equal measure. Nora made a small sound of surprise, then melted into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. And for the first time in 2 years, Colt felt something other than hollow. He felt full. He felt alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nora's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Colt, I love you, he said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, and it terrifies me, but not as much as the thought of losing you because I was too much of a coward to say it. You're not losing me. Nora's smile was radiant. I'm not going anywhere. I told you that, remember? I'm staying. Even though this town gossips? Even though some people will always see you as the maid who trapped the grieving widower? Let them talk. I've survived worse than gossip. Nora's fingers traced the line of his jaw. Besides, I've got Judith Lane on my side. And you, and Emma. That's more than enough. They stood in the kitchen holding each other while the last light faded from the sky and the house settled into its evening sounds. The creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the distant lowing of cattle. It felt right in a way Colt hadn't expected. Not like replacing what he'd lost, but like building something new from the rubble. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Will you come with me to visit Eliza's grave? I think I need to talk to her, to tell her about you, about us. Nora pulled back to look at him, her expression serious. Are you sure? That's a private thing, Colt. You don't have to include me. I want to. I need her to know. His voice caught. I need her to know that Emma's all right, that we're going to be all right. And I think she'd want to know about you, about how you saved us both. Then I'll come. Of course I'll come. They parted reluctantly, aware that Emma could wake at any moment, that the ranch hands might return from town, that the world was full of complications they'd have to navigate. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of November day that made Texas feel almost like autumn instead of just a less hot version of summer. Colt woke early, dressed carefully in his Sunday clothes, and found Nora already up making coffee and biscuits. Emma's still asleep, she said, handing him a cup. I thought maybe we could go before she wakes. Give you time with Eliza without having to manage a 3-year-old's emotions, too. You think of everything. Someone has to. But she said it with affection, not judgment. They walked up the hill behind the house where Eliza was buried beside Colt's parents and grandparents. The plot was well tended. Someone had been keeping the grass cut and the marker clean. Colt suspected Jack, though the old foreman had never mentioned it. The marker was simple limestone. Eliza Mallory, beloved wife and mother, 1852-1876. Her song continues. Colt stood before it, hat in his hands, Nora a respectful distance behind him. For a long moment he couldn't speak. The weight of 2 years pressed down on him, all the words unsaid, all the apologies unmade, all the love he hadn't known how to express. I'm sorry, he finally whispered, for leaving, for running, for being too broken to be what Emma needed. You deserve better than that. She deserved better. The wind rustled through the oak trees, carrying the scent of cedar and earth. Colt took a shaky breath and continued. But I'm back now. And she's amazing, Eliza. She's so much like you, brave and kind and stubborn as hell. She talks now, thanks to Nora. She laughs. She has a kitten named Hope. His voice broke. She's going to be all right. I promise you that. Whatever else I've failed at, I won't fail her again. He paused, gathering courage for the hardest part. There's someone I want you to meet. Her name is Nora May, and she's family, distant cousin through my grandmother, but she's become more than that. He glanced back at Nora, saw her standing strong and steady. She's brought music back to our house, brought laughter. She sings your lullaby to Emma, and somehow it doesn't hurt anymore. It just feels like you're still with us in a different way. Colt's throat closed up. He felt Nora's hand slip into his, offering silent support. I'm falling in love with her, he said, the words barely audible. Maybe I already have. And I need you to know, it doesn't mean I've forgotten you. It doesn't mean what we had wasn't real or wasn't enough. It just means I'm choosing to live again instead of just existing. And I hope, you'd want that for me. For us. The silence that followed felt sacred somehow, like a blessing given without words. Colt stood there, holding Nora's hand, and felt something shift inside him. Not the grief disappearing. Nora was right. That would never fully leave. But the guilt that had been wrapped around it like barbed wire finally loosened its hold. Thank you, Nora said softly, speaking for the first time. For loving him well. For giving him Emma. For being someone worth grieving. I'll do my best to honor what you built here, to help him be the man you believed he could be. Then she did something Colt didn't expect. She knelt down and placed her hand on the marker, her head bowed in respect. I promise I'll take care of them, both of them. And I'll make sure Emma knows who you were, what you meant. Your song won't be forgotten. When she rose, there were tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. Colt pulled her into his arms and held her while the morning sun climbed higher and the world woke around them. They walked back to the house hand in hand and found Emma waiting on the porch, Hope the kitten in her arms. She took one look at their joined hands, and her face lit up like Christmas morning. Are you going to get married? she asked with the blunt directness of a 3-year-old. Like in my storybook? Colt and Nora looked at each other, and he saw his own surprise and joy reflected in her eyes. Would you like that? He asked his daughter. If Nora became part of our family in that way? Yes! Emma bounced on her toes, disturbing Hope, who meowed in protest. Then she'd be my mama for real, not just for pretend. It doesn't work quite like that, sweetheart, Nora said gently. You already had a mama, and she loved you very much. I could never replace her. But you could be my second mama, Emma insisted. Jack says his granddaughter has 2 grandmas because his son married a woman who already had a mother. So people can have 2 mamas if they need them. The logic was irrefutable. Colt found himself laughing despite the tears on his face. She's got a point. She certainly does. Nora knelt down to Emma's level. All right. If your papa asks me to marry him, and if I say yes, I'll be your second mama. How does that sound? When will he ask? Well, I don't know. That's up to him. Emma turned to Colt with an expectant expression. Papa, are you going to ask? Right now? Colt felt his heart racing. This wasn't how he'd imagined it. No ring, no romantic setting, just a cold November morning on the back porch with his daughter demanding answers. But then again, nothing about his relationship with Nora had been conventional. Why should this be different? Yes, right now, Emma said impatiently. Before you get scared and run away again. The words stung, but they also held a terrible truth. Colt had run once. He'd let fear make his decisions. And look what it had cost him. He wasn't running anymore. Colt took Nora's hands in his, right there on the porch, with Emma watching and Hope purring and the whole ranch spreading out before them in the morning light. I don't have a ring, he said, and this isn't fancy or planned, but Nora May, you've given me back my life. You've given Emma back her father. You've filled this house with music and laughter and hope when I thought those things were gone forever. And I love you. I love you in a way that's different from how I loved Eliza, but no less real, no less strong. Nora's eyes were shining with tears. Colt, let me finish, please. He took a breath. I'm still broken in some ways. I'm still figuring out how to be a good father, a good man. I'll make mistakes. I'll have bad days when the grief comes back hard, but I promise I'll never run from you or Emma again. I promise I'll fight for this family, for this life we're building, and I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of the love you're offering. He squeezed her hands. So will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Emma's second mama and a Mallory in name as well as blood? For a moment, Nora didn't speak. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling in his. Then finally, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Emma's shriek of joy could probably be heard all the way to town. She launched herself at both of them, forcing them into a group embrace that included one very annoyed kitten. They stood there laughing and crying and holding each other while the sun climbed higher and the day stretched out before them full of possibility. Jack found them like that 10 minutes later, still wrapped in each other's arms on the porch. He took one look at their faces and smiled. About damn time, he said. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other till Christmas. We're getting married, Emma announced. And Nora's going to be my second mama. Is that so? Jack's eyes twinkled. Well, congratulations. Your daddy finally got some sense knocked into him. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Colt said dryly. Just speaking truth. Miss Nora's the best thing to happen to this ranch in years. Don't mess it up. I'll do my best. The news spread through the county with the speed of wildfire. By evening, neighbors were showing up with congratulations and barely concealed curiosity. Judith Lane arrived with a bottle of champagne and a knowing smile. I knew it, she said, hugging Nora tight. The moment I saw you two together in town, I knew. Catherine would be so pleased. Her brother's daughter and her grandson joined together. It's like the family's coming full circle. You think she'd approve? Colt asked. I know she would. Catherine believed in second chances, believed in love that grew from friendship and respect, not just passion. Judith raised her glass. To the happy couple. May your love be strong and your troubles be few. They set the date for December, despite Mrs. Alden's prediction, made via letter to several townspeople, that Colt would come to his senses and realize his mistake. But as the weeks passed and the wedding drew closer, it became clear that this wasn't a mistake. It was the rightest thing Colt had done since coming home. Nora moved into the master bedroom, Eliza's old room, though they removed most of the old furnishings and repainted the walls. Colt wanted it to feel like theirs, not like Nora was sleeping in a ghost's bed. She chose pale yellow walls and white curtains, and when it was finished, the room felt full of light instead of shadows. Emma helped pick flowers for the wedding, wildflowers from the hillside where Eliza was buried. It was Nora's idea, a way of including Eliza in the celebration, acknowledging that this new beginning was built on the foundation of what came before. The ceremony was small, held in the ranch house parlor, with Judge Harrison officiating. Emma stood between them, holding a basket of flower petals, beaming so hard Colt thought her face might split. Jack was best man. Judith Lane stood up for Nora, and the handful of ranch hands and neighbors who'd become friends filled the room with warmth and good wishes. Nora wore a simple dress, cream-colored wool with lace at the collar, nothing fancy but beautiful in its simplicity. Her hair was down, falling in dark honey waves around her shoulders, and when Colt saw her walking toward him, he felt his breath catch. Not because she looked like Eliza, she didn't, but because she looked like Nora, like home, like his future. "Dearly beloved," Judge Harrison began, and Colt tried to focus on the words, tried to be present for every moment. But mostly, he just looked at Nora and marveled at how he'd gotten here. How the woman he'd thought was just the maid had turned out to be his salvation. When it came time for the vows, Nora spoke first, her voice clear and strong. "Colt Mallory, I promise to love you on the good days and the hard ones, to be patient with your grief and gentle with your fears, to help you raise Emma with strength and kindness, to fill our home with music and laughter, and to never let you forget that you're braver than you think." Colt's turn. He'd practiced his vows a dozen times, but now all the fancy words fled. So he spoke from the heart instead. "Nora May, you came into my life when I was broken and lost. You could have judged me for my failures, but instead you showed me grace. You loved my daughter when I couldn't figure out how. You stood beside me when this whole town was ready to tear you down. And you taught me that it's possible to honor the past while still building a future. I promise to be worthy of that gift, to love you fiercely and protect you always, to be the man you believe I can be. I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Harrison said with satisfaction. "Colt, you may kiss your bride." And he did. In front of God and family and everyone who mattered, Colt kissed Nora and felt the last piece of his broken heart slot back into place. Not healed, it would always carry scars, but whole again in a different way. Emma threw her flower petals straight up in the air, showering them all in white and yellow, and everyone laughed. Then came the food, ham and biscuits, roasted vegetables, pies and cakes, made by every woman in the county who'd decided the Mallorys deserved support. They ate and drank and celebrated late into the evening. At one point, Colt found himself standing on the porch with Jack, watching the party through the window. Inside, Nora was teaching Emma a dance while Judith and the other ladies clapped along. "Your father would be proud," Jack said quietly. "What you've built here. What you've become." "I haven't become anything special. I'm just trying not to mess things up. That's all any of us can do. But you're doing it right, taking care of your own, honoring your debts, choosing love over fear. That's what matters." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "Besides, you picked a good woman. Miss Nora's got spine. She'll keep you honest." "That she will. And she's good for Emma. That child's bloomed like a flower in spring since Nora came. Talking, laughing, sleeping through the night. That's worth more than all the cattle in Texas." "I know." Colt watched his wife, spin Emma in a circle, both of them giggling. "I'm a lucky man, Jack. Luckier than I deserve." "Maybe, but you earned this too. By coming home, by facing your demons, by choosing to live instead of just surviving." Jack headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. Your grandmother, Catherine, she left a letter for your father when she died. He never opened it, kept it sealed in his desk. I think maybe it's time you read it." After Jack left, Colt stood alone in the cold November night, thinking about letters and legacies and the strange way family ties could stretch across generations and still hold strong. Inside, the party continued without him, but he needed this moment. Needed to stand in the dark and feel grateful for everything he'd been given, and everything he'd almost thrown away. He found the letter later that night, after the guests had left and Emma was asleep and Nora was in their room, unpacking the few belongings she'd brought to her new life. It was exactly where Jack said it would be, sealed with red wax and addressed in his grandmother's elegant script, "For my son, Thomas, to be opened after my death." His father had died without opening it. Colt broke the seal carefully and unfolded the yellowed paper. "My dearest Thomas, if you're reading this, I am gone. I pray my passing was peaceful and that you were with me at the end. But if not, if influenza or accident or the hard Texas sun took me before we could say goodbye, know that I died content. I had a good life with your father, a strong son, and land I loved. That is more than most women get. But there is something I need you to know, something I've carried like a stone in my heart for 24 years. I had a brother, Henry May. We were close as children, closer than most siblings. When I married your father and came to Texas, I thought Henry and I would stay in touch. Visit when we could, keep our bond strong across the miles. But the war came and the distance grew and letters stopped arriving. I heard terrible things, that Henry had been executed for helping Union soldiers, that his land was taken, that his wife and daughter were left with nothing. I tried to find them, Thomas. I wrote letters, sent money through friends, but I never got word back. I don't know if they're alive or dead. I don't know if they ever received my help. If by some miracle Henry's family survived, if his daughter Nora is still out there somewhere, find her. Help her. Your father owes Henry a debt that can never be repaid, but we can try. Give her land if she needs it, work if she's destitute, family if she's alone. Promise me this, Thomas. Promise me you'll make it right. Your loving mother, Catherine May Mallory." Colt read the letter 3 times, each word burning itself into his memory. His grandmother had known. She'd known about Nora, or at least about the possibility of Nora, had left instructions to care for her, and his father had died without ever opening the letter, without ever knowing his mother's final wish. But somehow, despite all that, Nora had found her way here anyway, had come to the Mallory Ranch looking for work and found family instead, had saved them as thoroughly as her father had saved this ranch 60 years ago. It wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. It was too perfect, too right. Colt climbed the stairs slowly, the letter clutched in his hand. He found Nora brushing out her hair by lamplight, still in her wedding dress. She looked up when he entered, her face soft with contentment. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the letter. "Something my grandmother left for my father. He never opened it." Colt handed it to her. "I think you should read it." He watched her face as she read, saw the tears start to fall halfway through. By the time she finished, she was sobbing, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Colt gathered her into his arms and held her while she cried for the aunt she'd never known, for the family connection that had been lost and found again, for all the years they'd been separated by silence and circumstance. "She tried to find me," Nora gasped out. "Catherine tried to find me. She loved your father. She wanted to help his family. But she died not knowing if we survived, not knowing if her letters ever reached us." Nora clutched the paper like it was precious. All that love lost in the space between. "Not lost," Colt said gently. "Just delayed. You're here now. You found your way home. Maybe Catherine's prayers were answered after all, just not in the way she expected." They sat together on the edge of the bed, holding each other while the lamp burned low and the house settled into silence around them. Outside, the November wind whispered through the oak trees, carrying secrets and stories and the memory of all the Mays and Mallorys who'd come before. "I want to do something," Nora said finally, wiping her eyes. "Something to honor them. Your grandmother, my father, all the connections that brought us here." "What did you have in mind?" "A garden, on the hillside near where they're buried. We could plant it together, you, me, and Emma. Flowers that bloom in every season so there's always color, a place where family can gather and remember." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "What do you think?" I think it's perfect. We'll start in spring, when the ground thaws. That night, their first as husband and wife, Colt lay awake long after Nora had fallen asleep beside him. He thought about all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment, grief and grace, loss and finding, the strange arithmetic of a life that balanced tragedy with unexpected joy. He'd lost Eliza. That pain would never fully fade, but he'd found Nora, and Emma had found a mother, and the Mallory Ranch had been saved twice now, once by Henry May's generosity during drought, and once by Henry May's daughter singing life back into a dead house. Some people would call it fate. Others would call it providence. Colt just called it a gift, one he intended to honor every day for the rest of his life. The years that followed were good ones. Not perfect. Life never was. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick and crops that failed. Emma had nightmares sometimes, and Colt still had days when the grief hit him like a storm. Nora struggled with the town gossips, who never quite accepted her, who whispered that she'd trapped the rich widower with her pretty face and convenient family connection. But they faced it all together. That made all the difference. Emma grew into a strong, bright girl who rode like her mother and had her father's stubborn jaw. She never forgot Eliza. Nora made sure of that, telling stories about the first mama who'd loved her so much. But she also called Nora Mama without hesitation, and anyone who saw them together knew the love was real. The garden they planted on the hillside became famous in the county, a riot of color that drew visitors from miles around. Roses and bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush and evening primrose, all arranged in careful patterns that spelled out names: Catherine, Henry, Thomas, Eliza. The dead honored by the living, the past woven into the present. Nora and Colt had 2 more children, a boy they named Henry and a girl called Catherine. Emma was a devoted older sister, teaching them to ride and sing and be brave. The house that had been so silent for 2 years rang with noise again, arguments and laughter, crying babies and slamming doors, all the beautiful chaos of a family that was alive and growing. On warm evenings, they'd gather on the porch, all of them together, and Nora would sing. Sometimes it was Eliza's lullaby, passed down through generations of May women. Sometimes it was new songs she'd written herself, songs about Texas hills and second chances and love that grew from ashes. And Colt would sit with his children around him and his wife beside him, and think about how close he'd come to missing all of this, how easily he could have stayed lost in his grief, letting it consume him until there was nothing left but bitterness and regret. But he'd come home, and Nora had been there, singing in the darkness, showing him the way back to light. 10 years after their wedding, on a December evening, much like the one when they'd married, Colt found Nora in the garden. She was kneeling beside Catherine's marker, planting winter jasmine that would bloom yellow in February. "The children are asking for a story," he said, sitting down beside her in the dirt. "They want to hear about how we met again." "Again? We've told them a dozen times." "They never get tired of it." Colt took her hand, dirty from the garden, and kissed her knuckles. "Neither do I, if I'm honest." Nora smiled, that same gentle smile that had first caught his attention all those years ago. "What should we tell them? The truth? That I was just a maid until you found me singing to your daughter?" "You were never just a maid. You were family all along. We just didn't know it yet." "And now?" "Now you're everything. Wife, mother, the heart of this family." Colt pulled her close, not caring about the dirt or the cold or the jasmine crushed beneath them. "You saved me, Nora. Saved all of us. I hope you know that." "We saved each other," she corrected. "That's what love does. It saves us from ourselves." Above them, the Texas sky stretched out vast and deep, scattered with stars that had witnessed every moment of their story, the grief and the healing, the fear and the courage, the ending that became a beginning. From the house, they could hear Emma calling the younger children to supper, her voice strong and sure. The kitten Hope, now an old cat, gray in the muzzle, wandered out to sit with them in the garden. And in the distance, rising on the evening air like a promise, came the sound of children singing. Not Eliza's lullaby this time, but a new song. Nora's song. A melody about coming home and finding family and love that refused to be silent. Colt closed his eyes and listened. his wife warm beside him, and his children's voices weaving through the dusk. This was what happiness sounded like, he thought. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love strong enough to carry you through it. The maid who'd come to his ranch with nothing but a song and a secret had given him everything. And every day for the rest of his life, Colt Mallory would be grateful for the night he came home and heard her singing in the darkness. Because that was the night his life began again. That was the night he remembered how to hope.